And as usual, that's high risk. Go and see what we can do today. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA. We had a great meetup yesterday. Couple of mailers, couple of printers, couple of consultant types. Made for a great conversation. So I thank everybody for coming. And I found the farmer I was looking for yesterday. And it turns out yesterday, if you weren't with us, I did a Heinz commercial where they're trying to promote sustainable soil use in growing tomatoes. Okay, maybe it's a little bit elliptical, you say. And I was trying to tell a story of Gabe Brown. I'm going to tell a little bit of it today. I'll also put a link in the show notes, and I'll also put an article up in the on the WDMA.org. There's you can also go there every day. We put the articles up that we talk about. So let's get over to that and let's play that. Okay.
Synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, monoculture grain production. That's how I learned it. 1995 came along and we lost our entire crop in a hailstorm. 1996, we got hailed out again, lost 100% of our crop. 1997, and we dried out. It was a devastating drought that year. 1998, got hailed out again, lost 80% of our crop. Thought, oh my goodness, how can I ever live through this and continue? And I really came to the realization that in agriculture, we're trying to impose our will on nature. We're always fighting nature. I needed to change the way I saw things and work with nature instead of against her. So now we do not till the soil. We do not apply copious amounts of pesticides and fertilizers. We always have armor protecting the soil surface. You don't see bare soil on our ranch. By having these cover crops growing, I was extending the growing season. And then we were allowing the livestock to graze those cover crops, integrating cattle back onto the land. I learned to mimic nature. And now, through the work of many others, it's become known as regenerative agriculture.
Better than sustainable, regenerative.
It's not the cow, it's the how. Every day they get moved to a new paddock, and then that grass has over a year to recover. What that's doing is it's taking massive amounts of CO2 out of the atmosphere and putting that carbon back into the soil. We increase biodiversity, it's good for insects, it's good for wildlife, we get cleaner water, and it increases our profitability as ranchers. It's a win-win-win situation.
Okay, so what a great story, right? What a great story. So let's get over to the PDFs. It turns out, our connection with Heinz yesterday, that Gabe won the Heinz Award in 2021. And, you know, that story about, what's interesting is that story about the hailstorms, actually, he says in a longer video, I watched several last night, in a longer video, he says that it actually, it's like it let the land sit fallow for 4 years. And the earthworms came back and the insects came back, and he realized he could graze much more of the year. He didn't have to feed his cattle hay for 6 months of the year. And now he shows his own soil. He says when it rains, the water penetrates 30 inches down. We've proven it. And he said we didn't have an inch of penetration. He said here's a piece of soil from the neighboring farm, and it was like a brick. He says that's what we were doing to our soil with normal, typical, how we learned it in school farming methods. And what's really amazing is that this works all over the world. It's part of what's reclaiming the Sahara Desert. Gabe is in North Dakota, but he's had people from the UN come, and they said this is we're changing farming globally. You say, well, what does that have to do with marketing? I thought you'd never ask. Where's my fan? Where's my provocateurs? They're usually making comments. What does this have to do with marketing? Absolutely everything, right? The old definition of marketing that I learned when I got started was find a need and fill it. Okay? Find a need and fill it, which is a far cry from tell the market how great we are, which is what I feel like we've descended into. Shout louder than your competition and tell everybody you're great. And maybe it'll get in their heads. We're working against nature, folks. Marketing today is working against nature, right? We need to remember to let the market tell us what's working and what's not working. That's where direct marketing comes in. I know it's not that direct. There's a lot of ways direct is not the best word for it. Let's call it regenerative marketing. You know, I learned in college. I went to an ag school, you know, and sadly they played last night in the NIT semifinals, and they played well for 15 minutes, 15 minutes, and they were up by 14, and then they stopped playing. They scored another 3 points the last 5 minutes of the half, and then they scored 13 points the first half of the second half, and they didn't score another point, not for 9+ minutes. They just are afraid to win. But anyway, that's where I went to school, and I learned that we were eroding topsoil and that it couldn't be replaced. It was irreplaceable. It would take thousands, if not millions of years to replace. Not true. Gabe is showing the world, Gabe and other farmers like him are showing the world that you can restore deserts. Cattle help. Oh, by the way, if you're thinking you're saving the planet by going vegan, you're not even saving yourself. No hat today, right? Yeah, I dispensed with the hat till football season. I was not very proud of him last night. You know, you'd like to say, well, nice game, but it wasn't. I mean, by the end, no one wanted to take a shot at all. And they've managed to eke out wins like that all season where somebody makes a basket. All we needed was one basket in 10 minutes, and we would have won the game. But that's just, their defense is awesome. So anyway, hi David. Now I want to talk about how we do that. A little bit of how. Okay. So David, who just commented, has a newsletter called Direct Mail Mastery. Okay, and he gives you tips on how to do direct mail better. Okay, and he's also got a course and other stuff like that. And he and I have been talking about RFM, and it's in his book. Wait, let me get his book. Let's see if I have it here. I know I do, but I got to run around this desk. Okay, here's his first edition of his book. Okay, and it's called Postal Mail Profits in a Digitally Obsessed Age. I think we could punch that up a bit, maybe, David. I thought it was about shipping because it had a shipping label on the front. But anyway, and so he put an article in his April newsletter, which I got yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And it says, you have fewer great customers than you think. And then he quotes Brian Kurtz. RFM is not a marketing rule of thumb. It's an eternal truth of how consumers behave in the marketplace. And when you create a 3-digit RFM score on any size list, at a minimum, there is some, really, it really works on any size list. You've got the keys to castle. You've got the keys to the castle to any direct response marketing business. It's a little hard to read this, although it's funny when I watch others talk about it's coming out. This one's coming out in April. Okay, well, I got a sneak preview because I've been talking with him about it. He said, and David says, often you calculating RFM scores, and RFM stands for recency, frequency, and monetary. Okay. Usually the top 20% are scored with a 5, the next 20% 4, 3, 2, 1, and so on. And that's true. That's what Arthur Middleton Hughes talked about, but he wasn't the first to do it. It's been around the direct mail world for a long, long time. Although we really weren't able to do it until we had computers because we didn't know who bought more than once, right? I went out to Gurney Seed in Yankton, South Dakota, and I looked around, and they hired me to do some creative consulting actually for their catalog. I showed them a strawberry spread. And they had a huge oversized catalog. It was this huge, you can't see my hands, but it was bigger than this. It was like, hold my hands out. No, it was like 24-inch when you laid it out at least. And it must have had at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen strawberry pictures. And all of the copy could pretty much be boiled down to extra plump, sweet and juicy, great for canning. I said to him, you might want to talk about the differences between the strawberries. This one's good for cold weather. This one's good for, et cetera. And so they did, and they upped their revenue per piece. But, there were boxes in the warehouse. I said, where are all these boxes? They said, that's our shipping documents. I said, well, what do you do with them? They said, nothing. We don't know what to do with them. Every time we ship somebody, we keep a piece of paper. I said, well, what you ought to do, I can help you with this if you want, is we can take those and put them in a computer, and we can see who's bought once, twice, 3 times. The ones who bought many times are more valuable. So if you got one last catalog, that's what I told Dick Cabela. Think of it this way. If I got one last catalog, who would I want to send it to? The person that spent $100 in one order, or the person that spent 3 times, spent $30? Well, the odds would be in your favor if you went with the 3 times for $30. That's the kind of thing that you can do with RFM, okay? So computers really were the start of RFM, though the concept, I think, was around before that. Okay, so let's say it was, the 70s, 80s, early 80s. I was still working with people who didn't have a computer in their catalog company. Okay, so enter John Miglosh. There, David kindly gives me a plug. Just found the comment section. Had to reduce my computer screen. Well, Vinny, you're gonna like the beginning, so you're gonna have to go back and get it. The problem with the fixed selection process is it counts customers rather than behaviors, and that's a little bit hard to grasp. Okay, but I got this from John Worth down at Woodworker Supply of New Mexico, and so here's John Worth gets a plug. So David coined this the Worth Miglosh. I wonder if it sounded better if it Miglosh Worth. It sounds like I'm worth something. I don't know. Anyway, it just occurred to me maybe we should flip that around. But anyway, the WM-RFM, I like that. That was good. WM-RFM is an alternative scoring method. Okay, and so then David goes on to explain how he scored this. And he talked about quite a bit about recency, and recency is actually probably the most flexible. If you have a long old company, you want to go deeper. George Mosier at National Business Furniture used to mail people for 10 years if they placed a significant furniture order, because furniture doesn't wear out right away. I still have my original desk when I originally started Miglosh Marketing in 1990, right behind me here. So it's not the best desk, but it's mine, So let me now, I'm going to try this. This is going to be a mess. It says you can identify your best buyers, right? So I once told Art Crowley Jr. at Guerin Products that he hired me to come out and do my little audit and look around for best practices. And he said, but it's got to make money. I can't just waste the money on you. So after we got done, I said, have you ever thought, do you know how many of your best buyers, and by best I meant that top 1%, which I'll show you in a minute, how many of your top 1% haven't ordered yet this year? It was about March. It was about this time of year. So best of last year, but didn't order again. He said, I don't know, but I can find out. I said, okay, you ought to call those people. And he said, well, we don't have a telemarketing department. Art Jr. was the son of the founder, Art Sr. So I looked him in the eye and I said, let me say that again. You ought to call these people. And so he did. And he found out that the number one reason that they hadn't ordered was because the person who placed the original order or the previous order last year had changed jobs a bit. And there was a new person. And we were still mailing the old person. And that's a big lesson in B2B. You got to keep your list up to date, and it usually means giving it a call. But the good news is that you may only have to call your top 1% to get a big boost in sales. Right now would be a good time to run that report. That's probably worth the price of this live stream. Okay, so anyway, we'll post this article, but David goes on and concludes really with, since the one-time buyers are contained in a single frequency bucket, they require much more investigation before being marketed to. And so I actually, because, I knew I had an answer for this too. It's an entirely different article. Well, I actually put in the link. If you go to the show notes, you can find a YouTube class, or you can just Google John Miglash RFM 111s, and it'll come up, because it does, over on YouTube. And I also have an article, What to Do with the 111s, and that's on migmar.com. But the links are in the article. So now what I want to do, just for a second, and this may not work. If this works, it'll be pretty much a miracle. But I took a data set. I'm working on, because David encouraged me to do this, I'm working on a software system that I had developed probably, I don't know what, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And it scores and illustrates these principles. So the first principle is that if we use quintiles, here's quintiles, sales, we actually do score in our real machine learning system. We score sales by quintiles. Now we also score margin by the worth method, okay, by this sort of logarithmic accumulation of, I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so let's say, so we do this partly because sometimes you have a small cell, it's got 10,000 in it or something, and you want a 5,000 minimum, and you want to cut that in half. And if you use the logarithmic scoring, then you end up with 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 1. It's like the multi-buyers and 1 in frequency, and to get a statistically valid split of that cell. We use decision tree logic, and so sometimes it's handy just to have the ability to split it in equal parts and cut it where you want. Okay, so we score sales that way, and you can see right here. I don't know if you can see it, but get really close to the screen. Okay, this is the summary of the sales scoring, and this is the counts in each quintile. So they're equal quintiles. See how nice that is? Okay. Now this, on the other hand, shows you frequency. Most of the buyers are one-time buyers, and if so, you look down here. There are very few of the really best buyers, and we can actually get the numbers. Okay, it's a fancy little tool. It's really fun. Okay, and so we see that frequency score, they're equal numbers, and I'm sorry, on the sales score, they're equal numbers. It's hard to read this way. And this is frequency score vertical. And vertical, there's 447, and then there's 38,000 in the one-time buyers in a customer file of about 65,000. So I have about a 10-time bigger sample set than David used in the article. Okay? Okay, so now, just for fun, instead of sales, before we do that, watch this. This is fun. We can actually show you the sales in each bucket. Okay? So if using that quintile method, there's actually $77 million worth of sales in that number 5 group. And there's only 600,000, almost 700,000. So there's like 1% of the sales in the ones, though there's equal numbers, right? When we made it count, there was equal numbers, bing, 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 by sales value, but there's 100 times the sales over here in the 5s. So what you're doing is you're taking the most valuable 13,000 of the 65, 20%, and basically all your sales is in there. What you really want to do is you want to do it the opposite. You want to divvy up your sales and be able to isolate those best customers and then treat the little bitty customers alike. Spend the same amount of money on them, but spend a very tiny amount of money because they're just not worth very much. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take the margin score, which is done according to the John Worth method, book, and now we see only 248 get a 5, and 52,000 get a 1. Why is that? Well, watch. When we take it from count to sales, just to show the dollar amount, okay, when we do that, what do we get? We get equal amounts of dollars. See that? How beautiful that is? We get equal amounts of dollars spread out, but those 250 customers at the top are worth $18 million. And those, what do we say those were? They were like 50,000 or something at the bottom. Yeah, 53,000 at the bottom are worth the same 20 million in sales, more or less. That should be stunning. That should just rock your world. Knowing, and here's the punchline, knowing that your file looks like that. If you're in e-commerce and you've been in business for a couple of years, that's all it takes is your file looks like that. Okay? And your marketing probably doesn't. You're probably sending emails to these guys that are worth millions and millions and millions. Okay? These guys are worth like almost $100,000 a piece. Right? There's 250 of them and there's $19 million. Okay? Divide that out. You're going to get a lot of money. And you're emailing them? And you're afraid to do a catalog? Or you're afraid to do three-dimensional mail? Or you're afraid to call them because it's too expensive? You're insane. You're like the farmer who doesn't care about his soil. All he cares about is the technique. You want to be digital. You want to do all acquisition. Let me tell you a rule about acquisition. The more valuable your customers are, the more you can afford to spend to acquire more. Do you want to acquire these, right, where they're worth a couple of bucks a piece? Or do you want to acquire these? Do you want to keep these? At all costs, you should be keeping these, right? Okay? And that's how you do regenerative marketing. You start by knowing how to work with your market. This is data you already have, and then we can start testing it and we can prove it. But you should no way spend the same amount of money on each customer. It's insane. Have a great day. I hope you learned something. Let's see what the graph looks like just for fun. Yeah, okay, here it is. Oh, it's the same. No, this is sales. See, sales is equal, right? But now if we do count, watch this. Boom, look at that. There's all the losers, and here's all the winners, right? And if you really want to know who's valuable, it's these guys, the 5 5s. And how many are there, though? How many are there? 144. That would be a good place to start. Especially, we can do this too if we want. If we take recency, we can overlay it, actually. And we can see, if you took the recency, which is, I got to move this over a little bit. Like Vinny, I got to find the right buttons to push. Oops. It's just up here in the upper right. Okay, so now I can find the best I can find the best of the best, which I think is this one. That's the 4s. That's the 5s. These are the hotline. There's 117 of the very, very best buyers. See that? There's no old ones. But if I go down a couple of notches, I'm going to find some old ones. See where we get some old ones. There we do. Here's some 3s that are very, very old. Haven't bought in a long time, but very valuable. Okay, oops. That was not what I wanted to do. This is a very powerful tool. It's almost too valuable. Okay, so you can see right here. These 29, 30 names haven't bought in a couple of years and spent huge amount of money. This is the huge amount of money score. Okay, have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will know